So if leadership comes out and is married to this bill, I think they're going to be in for big trouble. It doesn't seem that way to me. It seems what they're going to have to do, take into considerations the concerns both in the Senate and in the House from members who have concerns about the direction of this bill. And I think, candidly, what they're going to have to do, Wolf, is decide that it may take steps to undo what took steps to get into in health care, meaning they're not going to get everything they want today. They're going to have to push it out as long as they have a plan over several years that minimizes the impact on families who might lose coverage and maximizes the economic side and gain for the savings in this. If they do it over years and talk about it, I think they'll be okay. And to do that, they're going to need the president out using his bully pulpit, and then leaders in both chambers using their bully pulpit. They're not even close to that happening now.
But do you know, during the campaign, Mike, the president, as a candidate, almost on a daily basis said, this is the top priority, repeal and replace Obamacare, get rid of it immediately, it's disastrous, it's got to be removed. If they can't do it, they're going to spread it out over years. That's a major failure on the part of the president and the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate, right?
I don't think it's failure. It's the realization that the tentacles of the Obama health care plan got into health care and is collapsing markets today. And this is the biggest concern. There are real markets, health care markets, that are collapsing where people are losing choices rapidly, and companies are saying they can't sustain it. So if they don't do something, we're going to have a huge mess in healthcare in the coming years. So I think they can say, listen, we are going to get rid of it, and we're going to come up with a plan that's responsible so that you don't have the left versus right attacking each other for the next 2 years about a very personal issue, somebody's health care. I think if they look like adults coming through this process and say, yes, we're going to replace it, and here's how we're going to do it, I think that they could gain a lot of support, both in the Congress and from Americans.
And quickly, Rebecca Berg, if the Republicans lose 19 Republicans, they can't get to that 216 majority. They need to pass it and move it over to the Senate. And already, that's 21 Republicans. If they lose, already 19 Republicans have said they either will oppose it or they're not inclined to go along with it right now. They've got a big problem.
They do. And one of the reasons, Wolf, that this is so difficult, at least right now as the bill currently stands, is you have a number of centrist Republicans who are usually loyal soldiers, who usually go along with what their leadership wants to do, what Paul Ryan wants to do, who are concerned about this bill because they're in districts where there's a high proportion of elderly people or where Medicaid expansion has gone into effect. And they're in this very difficult political position of having to explain to their constituents that their government subsidies or their government health care is going to be reduced or completely taken away under this legislation. And that is very difficult to do. That's why you're seeing this bill face such an uphill battle at this point with those Republicans.
All right, guys, thanks. Coming up, as top Republicans openly dismiss President Trump's claim that he was wiretapped, the president breaks his silence, saying, quote, wiretap covers a lot of different things. And with the Republican health care plan in serious danger right now, the White House suggests it's open to changes. But when President Trump hits the road to rally any evidence, senators just got a classified briefing about it from the head of the FBI. What did he reveal? Growing dissent. Republican opposition to the GOP health care bill approaches critical mass in the House just hours ahead of a CNN town hall with Health Secretary Tom Price. Can the plan to repeal and replace Obamacare be salvaged? Campaigning again. President Trump holding a rally tonight paid for by his re-election campaign. He'll be touting the Republican health care plan, but didn't mention it at all in an earlier speech in Michigan. Is his push tonight too little, too late? And ditching the press. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson arrives in Asia, leaving reporters behind as he attempts to confront the North Korean threat. The plan includes pressure on China and a broader international coalition. Is it a mission impossible? We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following breaking news. President Trump speaking out for the first time in 11 days about his explosive claim that he was wiretapped by President Obama. Mr. Trump saying, and I'm quoting him now, wiretap covers a lot of different things, and hinting at new revelations in the coming weeks. Just a short time ago, the FBI Director, James Comey, briefed the Senate Judiciary Committee on the investigation into the president's wiretap claim and Russian meddling in the U.S. presidential election. The classified meeting came only after frustrated committee leaders threatened to hold up a key confirmation vote. We're also following the growing uncertainty over the future of the Republican plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. 19 House Republicans are now opposed to the bill or leaning against it. The Speaker, Paul Ryan, can only lose 21 Republican votes if the bill is to pass. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price will answer questions about the plan in a CNN town hall later tonight. We're also standing by for a rally by President Trump in Nashville, where he'll push the health care bill, which he failed to mention at an earlier speech in Michigan. In an unusual move, the president's rally is being paid for by his re-election campaign. We're covering all of that, much more this hour, with our guests, including Senator Joe Manchin. He's a key member of the Intelligence Committee. And our correspondents and expert analysts are also standing by. Let's begin with the president's new remarks about his wiretapping claim. Our White House correspondent Sarah Murray is joining us. Sarah, the president now seems to be walking back his allegation against President Obama. Update our viewers.
Well, he certainly seems to try to be clarifying them. I think it's worth noting, Wolf, there is still no proof of President Trump's original stunning claim that former President Obama wiretapped Trump Tower during the presidential campaign. Now, Donald Trump and his aides are saying, look, wiretap could mean a lot of different things. It could mean a lot of different methods of surveillance. But he's not backing down from the fact that there will be some evidence that will come out to vindicate him. Listen to what he said today.
But wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
Now, what those interesting items might be, we still do not know. The White House has not offered up any proof of their own to back up these claims. They've, of course, kicked it over to Congress to investigate. Congress is attempting to do just that, but it's worth noting, Wolf, that today the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, a Republican, said he has seen no evidence to back up Trump's claim.
All right, Sarah, thank you. Sarah Murray over at the White House. Let's get more on the FBI director's classified briefing on the wiretap investigation. Our chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto, is working that part of the story for us. Jim, James Comey met behind closed doors with key members of the Judiciary Committee. What do we know?
Well, on the key question of whether the FBI is looking into communications between members of the Trump campaign, his advisors during the campaign, and Russian officials, other Russians known to U.S. intelligence, on that question, the one that many senators, Republican and Democrat, have wanted a hard answer from the FBI director, we don't know what he told those lawmakers in there. Certainly a very sensitive question. But on the issue of wiretapping, as Sarah was saying there, much clearer, because you now have the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, the Republican Attorney General, the FBI director as well, saying, according to CNN's reporting, that there is no evidence that President Obama ordered a wiretap of President Trump, despite President Trump's charge. Listen to what we heard on the Hill today from the Republican, again, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee.
That evidence still remains the same, that we don't have any evidence that that took place. And in fact, I don't believe, just in the last week of time, the people we've talked to, I don't think there was an actual tap of Trump Tower.
To date, I've seen no evidence that supports the claim that President Trump made that his predecessor had wiretapped he and his associates at Trump Tower. Thus far, we have seen no basis for that whatsoever.
Now, to be clear, President Trump in his comments tonight, Sean Spicer at the White House press briefing yesterday, appear to be attempting to redefine what the president actually accused Mr. Obama of. And to be clear, President Trump accused Mr. Obama himself of ordering a wiretap of Trump himself. That's what President Trump said. Now, he and Spicer are saying, well, wiretap could mean a whole host of surveillance, possibly not Trump, maybe Trump associates. That is something that we've reported on and others. But again, it's not what the president initially charged, Wolf, as you know, in those explosive tweets.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, the Intelligence Committee leaders also talked about the investigation into possible ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. Tell us what they said.
That's exactly right. Now, this is a key question at CNN's reporting, and we cited multiple law enforcement and intelligence officials. The U.S. has intercepted communications between people close to Trump, advisors to Trump, people connected to the Trump campaign during the campaign, and Russian officials and other Russians known to U.S. intelligence. Asked about this, it was a very interesting moment between the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and the Democratic ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Have a listen to what they said.
And is there anything you've seen in the evidence so far that suggests that there were any conversations between people affiliated with the Trump campaign, Russian officials who are not the ambassador to Russia, anyone other tied to the Kremlin had conversations with the Trump campaign? Do you have any evidence?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, I wouldn't answer that question as categorically as my colleague. And you know, we're not privileged to talk about the contents of the investigation, but I think we need to be very precise when we talk about this. And I just don't think we can answer categorically and not in this forum.
Really just a remarkable moment there. Devin Nunes, again, the Republican chairman of the committee, saying, no, I haven't seen any evidence of those communications. And then Adam Schiff interrupting him, in effect, and saying, well, we can't say that so categorically. And to be clear, it's a challenge, Wolf, because this is one of the key lines of inquiry of this bipartisan Hill investigation. And you have that difference from the two most senior members at the very start. So the question is, will that committee, despite those differences, be able to pursue that question to effect something we're going to be watching very closely?
We certainly will. All right, Jim Sciutto reporting. Thanks very much. President Trump will be holding a rally soon in which he'll push for support of the Republican health care plan, which has Republican lawmakers increasingly divided. Our congressional correspondent, Sunlen Servati, is joining us. Sunlen, the president gave a speech in Michigan just a little while ago. He didn't even mention his health care push.
That's right, Wolf. Not a single word about health care at his first of two stops today. And frankly, this is the exact time the president needs to be out fully selling his health care plan, because the fight up here on Capitol Hill is intensifying, with Republican opposition mounting by the hour.
Tonight, President Trump hitting the road, and Vice President Pence working Capitol Hill, facing the ominous question.
Are you concerned this doesn't have the votes to pass, Mr. Vice President?
With the Republican health care plan hanging tenuously in the balance.
They don't have our votes, but more importantly, they need to discover they do not have your votes.
Opposition in Congress is growing by the day.
I'm leaning no, because I don't think the current bill can pass in the Senate. I think that the bill has to be strengthened.
The House bill in its current form can only afford to lose 21 Republican votes. According to CNN's latest whip count, already 19 House Republicans have said no or are leaning that way.
So if it came up in the House this afternoon, it would pass?
Well, it's not coming up this afternoon.
And Speaker of the House Paul Ryan's bill faces an even steeper climb in the Senate.
I don't think anyone believes its current form would pass in the U.S. Senate.
Sources tell CNN privately the White House is encouraging leadership to make more changes now, acknowledging the current House bill cannot pass in the Senate.
They aren't only writing a bill for 218 votes in House Representatives. They got to be writing a bill that gets 51 votes and Republican votes in the United States Senate.
A senior Republican aide telling CNN the White House is, quote, definitely looking at pretty big changes to the Ryan bill. In an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper today.
As far as the House is concerned, we have consensus, and we're fine-tuning our consensus.
Speaker Ryan trying to thread the needle.
We want Medicaid flexibility is a good example, giving states better chances at more flexibility. Those are the kinds of things that members are constantly giving us feedback, and we're constantly incorporating that feedback as this legislation moves through the process.
But making it clear he's pushing ahead with his bill.
So the Senate will take this baton when we hand it to them, and then they can do things to this bill. They can change this bill. They can amend this bill.
Building on comments from earlier today about the GOP's multi-step plan.
This is why we have a three-part process. You can't put everything you want in that bill, like, say, interstate shopping across state lines. And so this bill is what we can pass through reconciliation.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham today completely crushing that promise to pass more legislation later on.
You're not going to get 60 votes to buy insurance across state lines. That is a fantasy in the Senate. If you think that's important to health care reform, It's never going to happen in the Senate.
And after the vice president met with the conservative Republican study committee today, some members left that meeting sounding very optimistic. The chairman of that committee, Representative Mark Walker, he said that Pence told him he has reason to believe he should be hopeful because potentially changes to Medicaid could be coming, those changes that conservatives want. Of course, if you make significant changes to Medicaid, that would certainly risk alienating some moderates in the House. That's just one of many very tricky calculations the White House and leaders here in Congress are having to make, Wolf, as they move towards securing votes for this bill. Meantime, Sean Spicer on Air Force One moments ago just said that, of course, they are working with the leadership here to get, in his words, the best outcome. Wolf?
All right, Sunlen, thank you. Our congressional correspondent, Sunlen Serfati, reporting. Let's get some more on all of these headlines. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia is joining us. He's a key member of the Intelligence Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Wolf. How are you?
All right, so as a member of the committee, you were just briefed. The president says he thinks, in his words, very interesting items will come to the forefront over the next 2 weeks on his charge against President Obama that he was wiretapped over a Trump Tower in New York City. Do you have any idea what the president is talking about?
No, we'd be happy to see whatever they have, whatever President Trump has or his staff. Please turn it over to the Intel Committee. Let us review it. Right now, we've seen nothing.
Because the president said in this interview, he said, wiretap, in his words, covers a lot of different things. He wasn't necessarily being precise when he, in those 4 tweets 11 days ago, repeatedly accused President Obama of wiretapping him at Trump Tower in New York City. Do you think he's backing away from those initial claims?
I really don't know. You know, if he has facts and things that we need to see, that would be fine. If not, then we haven't seen anything from the Intel communities that basically are reporting to the Intel Committee. So all of our intelligence gathering has not proven or shown anything that leads us to believe that would happen.
So you've seen absolutely nothing to back up the president's claim, either in open information or classified information that you've received?
Not as of today. We're still looking. There's an awful lot that we're looking at, and there's an awful lot of intelligence gathering that's going on from the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and all the areas that we're responsible for, Wolf. So we'll be looking into everything that's presented. And we had a meeting today, and we're going to continue to meet on, we come back in on Tuesday. We'll hit the ground running, and we're going to get to the bottom. And we want to make sure that we look at all Russians' involvement, any way, shape, or form, from their involvement into our elections to their involvement basically with President Trump or any members of his organization or his family ties, if you will, that could be of conflict. We're not seeing anything as of yet, but we're looking into that, and that's where the intel will take us.
The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Republican Devin Nunes, he says, in his words, it's possible the president could have been swept up in what they call incidental collection of data. In other words, others were being surveilled by the U.S. government, whether law enforcement or the intelligence community, and Trump, President Trump, then candidate Trump, or others working with him could have been swept up incidentally in that. You buy that?
Well, what I'm trying to make sure that we do in our committee, and I will say this, the makeup of the Senate Intelligence Committee is 15, I think, extremely honorable people that'll put their country above any interest of any person. With that being said, we'll get the facts, and the facts will get us to the truth, and we'll make decisions based on that. With that being said, it's not a witch hunt, not going to be. We want to make sure that they know that if our president is not involved, they know that. If there is involvement, we'll find out and what effect it would have on governing our country and how we basically run this great country of ours. The American people need to know there's an awful lot of accusations floating around. We want to get to the bottom of it and find out if they're justified or not. So I'm not going to speculate and say things, what other people, what could have happened and what maybe happened. I want to know exactly what did or did not happen. Wolf.
I know you've been briefed on Russia's involvement, the cyber attacks against the Democrats during the presidential campaign. Do you believe there is clear evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians?
We've seen none of that whatsoever as of today. We do know that the Russians made every attempt and worked more diligently and much more intricately than ever before trying to be involved in our election process. We know that. Okay? We also know that basically they didn't have any effect on the outcome of the election. It is what it is. President Trump is our president. With that being said, now they intended to. Did they perfect some things? Are they working around the world now as we talk, trying to be effective in Germany, in France, and other parts of the civilized world, if you will, where they have a democracy? I think they want to disrupt that. Can we stop that? And our allies are saying, if you can't stop them in your own country, how can you help us? We're going to get to the bottom, because basically democracy depends on us stopping the Russians from intervening and trying to disrupt the process of elections. So that needs to be done.
Senator Mark Warner, who's the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, your Democratic colleague, he's expressed concern over the informal political advisor to Donald Trump, Roger Stone's ties to Russia, wouldn't rule out calling him before the committee. Do you believe Roger Stone, among others, should be called before your committee to testify?
I believe any person of interest that has spoken or been spoken about or shows there might have been a connection of any sort, any way, shape, or form, we need to bring them before that to clear it up. Either they did or they didn't. Either it was detrimental or it wasn't. But we're going to bring everybody that we know that could have been tied, associated, or basically speculated that could have been involved. We owe that to the American public. That's our job. We have the subpoena power if needed. Hopefully we won't need that. We're able to have an intel committee that's very, very good and professional, and we have the ability to call up 17 different agencies that can help us.
I'm going to keep you with us, Senator. We have more to discuss.
Sure.
There's other issues coming into the Situation Room right now. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. President Trump will be holding a political rally soon in Nashville, Tennessee, where he'll be touting the Republican health care plan. The troubled bill, though, is facing an increasingly uncertain future, with a growing number of Republican lawmakers in the House and the Senate opposing it. We're back with Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. He's a member of the Intelligence Committee. Senator, let's talk about health care. As you know, the president was in Michigan a little while ago giving another speech there. He didn't even mention the health care bill when he spoke in Michigan. Do you think he's trying to distance himself from this bill?
Well, I really don't know. You know, I got to speak to the president, I'm going to say 4 weeks or more ago, when all this was coming out and they were all frothing about repeal, repeal, repeal. And I just basically said, Mr. President, be very careful. I said, you know, the way this system works, we got a toxic and political environment. You can repeal it with 51 Republicans and no Democrats. But you really can't do the fixes that need to be fixed unless you have 60. And that means you're going to have at least 8 Democrats. I'm willing to sit and work and talk and whatever. There's no way I can support a repeal, because that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Well, they wanted to repeal it and then take 2 years to fix it, then that went to repeal and replace the same day. I would hope that he would pause before he lets them go down this path, because I've said this, many West Virginians were helped very much about the affordable health care helped them. Probably a couple 100,000 people that never had insurance are getting it now for the first time. With that being said, Wolf, they don't know how they got it. 70% of them voted for Donald Trump. They don't know it was the Democrats or the Barack Obama or whatever you want to call it, Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. They just know they have health care for the first time. And I said, Mr. President, they'll definitely know who took it away from them. Be very careful.
So you think the Speaker, Paul Ryan, should pull the current bill?
I'm not going to tell Speaker Ryan how to run his operation on that side. I'm just saying, if I listen to my colleagues, Republican colleagues and friends in the Senate, they are not very warm recepting that piece of legislation as they know it coming from the House for both reasons. You have the Rand Pauls are against it for one reason, and you have other people, Rob Portman, against it and Shelley Capito for another reason. So we'll just see what works out, but they've got problems, serious problems. And the only person that's reached out to talk to me at all about this has been Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana. And I told him what we didn't like about the bill he was doing. We were trying to work and see if there was a pathway forward, but then that bill was scrapped and we never heard any more.
Yeah, Senator Cassidy is a physician himself. He's expressed concern about parts of this. When you spoke to the president about health care, did you come away with the impression that he understands your concerns, that you had an impact on him, or what was his reaction?
Well, basically, I just told him, I said, Mr. President, there's no way I can vote to repeal. I will not. I'm asking you not to let them vote on repealing, because then there's no way to fix it, because you don't have 60 votes. I think you heard Lindsey Graham say about the same thing. There's not 60 votes there, whether it's the cross border state lines of buying insurance or whatever. Here's the thing. In my state of West Virginia, the poor people get hit the hardest. 24 million people will lose their insurance because they can't afford it. Then you have the elderly who have to pay a lot more. They're going to drop them off. And then you have the addiction, opiate addiction, who are getting treatment for the first time. They're going to lose their treatment. So I get a triple whammy. I get the poor get hit harder, the elderly get hit hard, and those who are addicted, which are trying to get cleaned up back in society, are getting hit. So I said, someone's got to have a moral compass inside of them. And to add insult to injury, Wolf, they're going to give $575 billion tax cut to the wealthiest Americans. That is not right. That is not morally right.
And you finally, Senator, you believe some West Virginians who were on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, are healthy today or even alive today because of that?
Oh, absolutely. But on the other hand, you know, I understand, yes. Wolf, you have to think of it this way. We gave 20 million people health care, the most valuable asset that we have in the social government, such as foreign social services. With that being said, anything you buy today, you order it from a store, it comes with a box, you open up, there's instructions that tells you how to assemble it or how to use it. We gave 20 million people health care with not one word of instructions. There's so much synergies, there's so much efficiencies that if we just work together, we can make this work. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Senator Manchin, as usual, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf. Good to be with you.
And an important note, Senator, and to all of our viewers, coming up later tonight, a CNN town hall special with the Health and Human Services Secretary, Dr. Tom Price. Obamacare, what comes next? Join Dana Bash and me later tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, only here on CNN. Just ahead, President Trump breaks an 11-day silence on his wiretapping claims against President Obama with a cryptic new claim that, quote, very interesting items may surface in the next couple of weeks. And the president hits the campaign trail, but doesn't even mention the ailing GOP health care plan. He has another appearance. That's coming up. Will he go to bat for the Republican? Let's dig deeper with our experts and analysts. And David Chalian, the president, weighed in just a little while ago for the first time about those 4 tweets. In an interview with Fox News, he was asked why he tweeted about wiretapping before producing evidence. Listen to what he said.
But wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
All right, so did the president just reopen all of this after the White House has been trying desperately over the past few days to walk it back?
No, I think this is actually part of the walk back. I think Donald Trump is trying to get away from his unsubstantiated false claims on Twitter 11 days ago. When the sitting president of the United States accused the former president of the United States of tapping his phones. I think we've seen the White House over the last week and a half sort of twist itself into a pretzel to try to say and put up air quotes what he meant to say, what he really was talking about. And now I think you see, Wolf, Donald Trump trying to get in that game, but that is not what he tweeted. He's changing his words now. He's trying to change the conversation here. And, you know, he's still going to have to be held accountable for what he actually claimed Barack Obama did in those tweets.
We heard, Gloria, the House Intelligence Committee chairman and the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman, both of them say they haven't seen any evidence to back up President Trump's wiretap claims against President Obama. So where does the White House go from here?
Well, you see the beginning, as David was saying, you know, they're trying to broaden what the president said, which is not accurate. We can all read his tweets. And where the White House goes from here, Wolf, is they go to Congress. Originally, when they were trying to kind of get rid of this story after the president tweeted that Saturday morning, they said, you know, we want Congress to investigate. Well, be careful what you wish for, because Congress is investigating. And we saw, you know, we saw Lindsey Graham today make it very clear, Senator Graham, that we need to get to the bottom of this. Joe Manchin just said it to you. And he said, you know, what he wants to know from the FBI director is there a criminal investigation going on? And was there a warrant out to wiretap Donald Trump's phones. And all of this will lead to an investigation of the question of collusion and the question of why the intelligence community has been looking into links between Russia and those in the orbit of Donald Trump. And so I think what the White House has to do now, they've already made it clear they're kind of trying to sort of broaden what the president said, but now the White House has to let Congress do its oversight because actually they asked for it.
All right, a more important point indeed. David Swerdlick, Congressman Adam Schiff, he's the ranking Democrat of the House Intelligence Committee. He called it irresponsible of the president to make the claims and for Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, to defend them. As you know, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, also faced questions about it. He says he's seen no evidence. Is the president putting his staff in a rather uncomfortable position?
He is, Wolf. Look, if it turns out, in fact, that no more evidence comes forth when all this is over with, and we know right now that the infamous Breitbart story and all the rest does not back up those specific claims that were in President Trump's tweet storm from 2 Saturdays ago, then I think it's something that's a notch further than irresponsible. And he's putting his staff and Republicans in Congress in that difficult position because ultimately their reputations and their credibility is on the line in this as well, not just his.
David Fairholt, Adam Schiff, the congressman, also said this whole issue raises serious concerns that the president is willing to state things that don't have any basis. As someone, you cover the president, you share that concern because that's the argument that a lot of people are saying. The president just makes a charge which has no evidence and you can't back it up.
Well, this is not the first time we've faced questions like this about the president. He made this accusation that 3 million people voted illegally, that this was the biggest inauguration crowd ever. The thing is, there's so many people out there who put their hopes in Donald Trump that he would come in and be the person he said he would be. He'd work hard, work all the time to get them jobs, to fix their health care, to change the country. They're counting on him to be doing that right now. And instead, we're sort of doing this runaround about whether this thing that he said that's obviously not true is not true. And with Trump saying, you know, basically, look over there. And then, you know, that gives him 2 weeks, supposedly more, to produce evidence of this thing that doesn't exist. But people are counting on him to be doing something right now, and it's not this.
So, Gloria, when the president spoke at this political rally in Michigan a few hours ago, didn't mention repealing and replacing Obamacare, didn't mention health care at all. Why do you think there was that silence during an event like this?
Well, it's because he hasn't really hugged this bill very closely, Wolf. I mean, there's division inside the White House about the provisions of this. Donald Trump, who is not known for being shy about putting his name on things, hasn't exactly rushed to call this Trump care. And I think the White House and the Hill are trying to figure out how they can get something through the Congress. And you have divided Republican Party. You have Paul Ryan earlier told Jake Tapper, oh, the reason he didn't mention it, it was because he was talking about auto emission standards, and you can't mix those two things. Well, Donald Trump has been known to mix up a few things in his speeches. And so it's clear that they've got a lot of work to do. We'll see what he does later. We'll see if he mentions it. But the question is whether he's going to barnstorm for this and how they're going to try and work this out. Donald Trump says he's a great negotiator, and this is going to be one big, beautiful negotiation. So far, we haven't seen it.
David Fairholt, in that interview with Jake Tapper, the House Speaker Paul Ryan refused to say if he thought the Republican bill could pass the House as is today. It's going to have to be changed dramatically, I assume, if it's going to be past the House and move over to the Senate.
I think that's right, that it will have to be changed. The question is that there's no obvious change that fixes it. As your correspondents have said before, any of the changes that please people on the right are going to make people in the moderate segment of the Republican Party uneasy. There's nothing obvious, even after all this talk, that Trump could just say, okay, do that, and it makes it passable, even among Republicans. So, yes, I think it will need to be amended. The question is, can President Trump find that magic thing that gets people across the finish line?
Yeah, even if it gets passed in the House of Representatives, unclear if they've got the 51 votes to pass it in the Senate, let alone the 60 they would need down the road. All right, guys, thanks very much. Just ahead, Secretary of State Tillerson makes a crucial trip to Asia, taking just one reporter from a conservative website. So why is he ditching the news media? And senior U.S. Navy officers and a defense contractor known as Fat Leonard, they are named in a grand jury indictment shedding new light on a bribery and sex scandal. President Trump's new travel ban. It was scheduled to take effect tomorrow. Let's bring in our senior legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin. He's joining us on the phone. It looks like another major setback potentially in the works for Part 2, 2.0 as they're calling it, the revised travel ban. Jeffrey, tell our viewers what happened.
It's another major setback for the Trump administration because a federal judge in Hawaii has done the same thing that the federal judge in Washington state did with the first travel ban. He said it violated the Constitution as far in a preliminary ruling, and he prevented it nationwide from going into effect. Now, 2 more judges are expected to rule on this as well in Maryland and in Washington state. But now, as of now, the travel ban will not go into effect because the district judge, Derek Watson in Honolulu, said the new ban, just like the old ban, violated the Constitution.
And this is a district court judge, a federal district court judge in Hawaii, but presumably it will now go before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which Hawaii is part of, right?
Right. The same Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that upheld the ban on the first executive order last month. Now, Hawaii is also part, but there are 2 more judges yet to be heard from tonight. The same judge in Washington who originally imposed the ban, he's now looking at the second executive order, as is the judge in Maryland. But as of today, as of right now, the ban will not go into effect tomorrow because of Judge Watson's decision in Hawaii.
Justice reporter Laura Jarrett is with us. Laura, you've actually been going through the decision by this district court judge in Hawaii. Tell us a little bit more about it.
That's right, Wolf. The judge in Hawaii, Judge Watson, said that the plaintiffs have met their burden of establishing a strong likelihood of success on the merits of their establishment claim. And you'll remember earlier today they were in court making the argument that this is essentially religious discrimination. They have drawn on statements from President Trump on the campaign trail and statements from other supporters of his and senior advisors, and they have said that this order essentially shows religious discrimination. Now, of course, the Justice Department strongly contests this and said in multiple hearings that the court should not look at campaign statements whatsoever. But clearly, this judge in Hawaii, at least, has been persuaded for now.
Because the travel ban, Part 2, basically stops travel from 6 Muslim-majority countries. Used to be 7. Iraq was taken off that list. Is that part of the explanation for this district court judge saying it violates the Establishment Clause?
That's right, Wolf. The new order, I should say, blocks specifically Section 2, which is the 6-country ban for 90 days, and it also blocks Section 6 of the new executive order, which is the 120-day ban for all refugees. So both of those are now blocked nationwide.
And Jeffrey Toobin, let me get back to you for a second. What do we anticipate happens next? Walk us through the process.
Well, it's a very peculiar situation because there are these 2 other judges considering the same issue right now. If they rule differently, I think an appeals court is going to have to step in and decide what to do. Although I think the Judge Watson's decision in Hawaii, unless it's overturned, has to be considered the law of the land, even if the other 2 judges rule the other way. But it is certainly a very unusual situation where you have 3 judges considering the exact same issue at the exact same time. But when you have one judge go first, as the Hawaii judge did, I think his ruling has to be considered the law of the land until some superior court tells us that it's not. And these other 2 judges are not superior courts. They are peer courts in other parts of the country. So I think unless the Ninth Circuit steps in, and there's certainly no way the Ninth Circuit can get this case before tomorrow, this executive order will not go into effect tomorrow. So we are back again, probably in a frantic appeals process before the Ninth Circuit, as what happened in the first go-round.
And Laura, I want you to weigh in as well, because you've studied this very, very closely. The new rules, what, were supposed to take effect at midnight tonight? Is that right?
That's exactly right, Wolf. It was supposed to go into effect at 12:01, but now just hours before, this judge has said no. The question Jeff Toobin brings up is a good one, because at this moment, a judge in Seattle was also hearing a challenge. Now, he may say, okay, now that Hawaii has ruled, I don't need to accept that challenge. I can press pause on that for a bit. But I think it's very likely we will see a challenge to this immediately from the government.
Because they thought, Jeffrey Toobin, that if they made some significant changes from travel ban 1 and came up with some revisions in 2, it would go forward. But now this is a major setback.
It is a major setback, and it is, I mean, I have to say, pretty surprising. I thought they made some changes in the executive order that addressed at least some of the concerns that the judges decided that the judges had in the with the first executive order. But obviously, at least according to this first judge in Hawaii, they didn't change it enough. It remains a violation of the Constitution, and it will not go into effect tomorrow.
Key provisions of this new travel ban on hold, at least for now. A major setback, at least for now, for the Trump administration. All right, guys, we'll stay on top of the breaking story. Our special coverage will continue right now on Aaron Burnett Out Front.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And out front now, breaking news. President Trump, right now at this hour, we are learning that there has been a block of the travel ban. A federal judge just moments ago issuing a restraining order on Donald Trump's latest executive order on immigration. It was slated to go into effect at midnight tonight. And let's get straight to Jeff Zeleny for the latest on this. Jeff, this is the retooled, quote-unquote, improved executive order that would ban immigrants from, or people coming in, to be clear, from 6 Muslim-majority countries, as well as a temporary stay on refugees. There had been a lot of tweaks in the language, but now a nationwide ban coming out of Hawaii.
That's right, Aaron, and the White House is still assessing this right now. In fact, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who is on the ground here in Nashville, Tennessee, where the president is scheduled to have a rally here coming up, he just told reporters moments ago that they are still looking at this decision, and he would have more to comment on later, he said, after the rally as they fly back to Washington. But, Aaron, I would be very surprised if President Trump did not say something about that here at the rally. Now, this, of course, is something the administration spent a lot more time on. They, worked on it for weeks, back to the drawing board, and they simply wanted to get this right. And there was a delay in terms of the implementation of this. So this is taking them by surprise. It is angering them, no doubt, but they are still assessing this at the moment here. But as you said, that Hawaii decision, of course, affects the entire country, but it certainly will be one more piece of the president's argument here for why he needs to do something. So, Aaron, already in this rally here, they've been talking about immigration, illegal immigration. I certainly expect the president to keep talking about that here at this red state rally in Tennessee, Aaron.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thank you very much. And let's go to our justice reporter, Laura Jarrett, for more on this. Laura, what are you learning right now? Again, this is stunning. They had retooled this. This was possible, but not expected.
Well, that's exactly right, Aaron. They certainly felt like they had done a lot to remedy the problems that the courts had outlined last time. They exempted green card holders. They exempted those with valid visas. They got rid of the provision that was in the last executive order that prioritized certain religious minorities. But the court in Hawaii said that's not enough. And in this ruling, which is a nationwide block of Section 2 of the order, which is the 90-day ban of foreign travelers from the 6 Muslim-majority countries, as well as the 120-day ban preventing all refugees from coming here. The judge specifically looked at the Establishment Clause challenge, and that's the one that the states have been levying for saying, look, this really discriminates on the basis of religion. Aaron?
All right. Thank you very much, Laura. I've got Paul Callan here and Mark Preston. So, Paul, what Laura just said there, that in particular this goes at the Establishment Clause. There had been a lot of changes, as she points out. green card holders, visa holders, no religious prioritization. There had been a lot of changes. It wasn't permanent in terms of the ban on Syrian refugees. They're focusing on the Establishment Clause. Put that into English.
This is surprising to me. The Establishment Clause basically says there has to be a separation of state from religion in the United States. It's the religious clause of the Constitution. And the reason that this was criticized by the Washington state judge originally was that there was a special subsection giving special exemptions to certain Christian minorities, but not Muslim minorities.
But that was removed.
They took it out completely. So this thing, the new one, doesn't say anything about religion at all. Now, why is the Hawaii judge doing this? Well, he's doing this for another reason. You remember there was a big argument about what Trump had to say during the campaign about the Muslim religion. He said he was going to do a Muslim ban, and Giuliani, right at the very end when this thing was being discussed in court, said, I had a discussion with Trump about how to implement a Muslim ban. So I think the court here is looking at those discussions and saying there's religious discrimination.
And that is important, Mark, because the Department of Justice even today said those things should not be admissible. Those were things just said on the campaign trail, sort of as if they had a premonition or a concern. Certainly they knew this case in Hawaii was up today. And now there's one in Washington State. Judge Robart, who of course put the original temporary restraining order, was slated to rule any moment, really, about whether Washington State would go ahead with this again. So they put this out there saying that shouldn't be admissible. So it's significant that you have now not Judge Robart times two, another judge saying basically it is.
Right, and we could see a double barrel, right? We'll see what happens, in a ruling, if we could see in the next couple of hours, quite frankly, if not sooner. This has really been a difficult day for the Trump administration, which has had a lot of difficult days. Not only do you have what happened on Capitol Hill earlier today, when you had Republicans, senior Republicans, saying that they found no evidence of wiretapping, and then Trump Tower, and then what we have just seen now. The White House, I think, was unexpected. They did not expect this to happen. They were not prepared. They thought they had gotten past this. I think most of us thought they'd gotten past this.
I think most people did. I mean, we have Alan Dershowitz, and Alan, you were here along with Mark and Paul Callan the first night as this news broke with the original restraining order. Are you surprised by the decision out of Hawaii?
No, I'm not surprised, because the attitude of the court is that there can't be any lawful order as long as candidate Trump said what he said and Giuliani said what he said. That makes anything that happens thereafter simply a cover for a Muslim ban. And so the whole effort to try to clean it up was futile, taking out the religious part of it, which gave religious preference to discriminated against groups. That didn't matter, because if the entire ban, no matter what it says, was badly motivated, then it's struck down. Now, the problem is that the Supreme Court has taken exactly the opposite attitude when it comes to looking at motive and intent. They've said you don't look at motive and intent. You look at the words of the regulation, and that's what the Supreme Court will ultimately hold. So
and is that, Alan, where you believe this is now headed? I mean, they're not, they have not replied. I want to emphasize this. There's been no response. But given what they have done so far, it would seem very reasonable for them at this point to dig in their heels. Now, they've said time is of the essence, which would go against that. But they've also said this one is fixed, so that they would take this all the way to the Supreme Court.
They're going to go to the Ninth Circuit first, and there it's a crapshoot. You have to see what panel you get. There are 20-some-odd judges, some of them liberal, some of them conservative. They'll probably seek expedited appeal through the Ninth Circuit and up to the Supreme Court. But I think even with 8 justices, they have a very good chance of winning in the Supreme Court. And if they get their 9th justice in there in a timely way, I think it's an almost certainty that they would uphold at least the core of this newly revised travel prohibition. I'm not saying it's a good ban or a good prohibition, but there's a difference between something being bad as a matter of policy and being unconstitutional.
Which is what I want to get at with you, Paul. When you look at this legally and you're saying, this Establishment Clause, again, is saying what he said in the campaign is admissible. And Alan is saying that's clearly what they're saying, but the Supreme Court would historically say, or by precedent would say, no, it's not. Intent is not what matters. The letter of the order is what matters. Is this political on the part of these judges?
Well, it's interesting, because this Hawaii court, part of the Ninth Circuit, and you're going to see the Trump administration attacking the crazy Ninth Circuit again and saying you can't go by what they say. They're too liberal, that court. I do think, and I agree with Alan on this, the words of the statute matter, and I think it is dangerous when you go back into a political campaign and say, we're going to interpret the law based upon what was said during the course of a lengthy and contentious political campaign. I can't ever remember seeing that done before. It's really kind of a new concept to do that.
So Alan, would you say then these judges are being political? Because as part of this, what you're also, if you could explain, because, you know, we had it out of Washington and then the Ninth Circuit. Now this is a separate temporary restraining order and a separate executive order. But does it all build to the same precedent? Because so far the precedent in this overall issue is all going in one direction, and that is against the executive order.
I wouldn't say it's political in the sense of partisan. I would say the judges have points of view. And a Hawaii judge, think of it, it's Hawaii, the most multicultural ethnic state in our union, is likely to have a strong bias, conscious or unconscious, in favor of immigration and against any kind of discrimination based on religion. So I wouldn't call it partisan politics. I don't think it matters whether it's a Democrat or Republican. I don't think people are trying to help or hurt a particular party. But I do think ideology matters, and the ideology of many judges is going to be in favor of a more permissive immigration and against anything they see as religious discrimination.
What this is going to come down to, Mark, though, which is going to be very crucial, is how the White House responds to this.
Right.
And in particular, not even the White House, how Donald Trump responds to it.
Sure.
Right? He could come out guns blazing against whatever names and adjectives he'd like to put on this judge or on the upcoming Ninth Circuit, possibly hurting his cause, or not. That is the decision, because he's now finding out about this, literally in the past 2 or 3 minutes he found out.
I mean, he found out as we found out. You know, what's going to be interesting is how quickly they react to it, and not just publicly, but what they do to try to make an appeal, because remember, they delayed going back in. They initially went in and said that they wrote the law very quickly because it was in our national security interest. It was knocked down. They were ready to come back out with it. They then delayed it. And then, of course, we are where we are right now. If they come back in very speedy and they say we need this done very quickly, that it could be questioned, because the fact of the matter is, why wasn't it done quicker? But to your point about what public opinion is right now, the politicization of the judiciary, specifically from politicians, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, that are going to be attacking a co-equal branch of government, I think is very dangerous. And we've seen a lot of that happen lately.
Right, because, Paul, what they're doing is saying that what he said in a political context is what they're basing the decision on, if this establishment clause
well, they
point
are,
is
and
the
they're
point.
going, yes, they're going back. How far back can you go? Can you go back a year earlier when he first started running for office, or 6 months in, or 3 months in? It's an unusual thing to do. But I think the other thing that, and I agree with Mark here, that they're up against the wall now, because before they had the option of withdrawing the executive order, rewriting it in a slower, more careful manner, and reissuing. Now they've reissued. They're going to look like complete idiots if they say, all right, we're going to take this one back and we're going to rewrite a third one. They've got to go up to the courts now and defend this.
They have to fight this one all the way to the top.
Right.
And I just want to bring in Jim Sciutto quickly before we go, because, Jim, as this news is sort of breaking around the world, what is the reaction to this restraining order?
Well, let me tell you this, Sarah. There are the politics, there are the law, and then there's the national security implications from this. And the fact is, you speak to many senior commanders in the U.S. military who served in that region. They don't see this, not only do they not see this as helpful, they see it as counterproductive, particularly in terms of relationships, key counter-terror relationships with Muslim-majority countries in the region. And it's not just U.S. military commanders. I was in Britain last week. You speak to the British. They see this ban as counterproductive, close U.S. ally. I spoke to a Saudi senior advisor today who was here on the Saudi Crown Prince's visit to Washington, who described the travel ban as counterproductive. So you have that viewpoint, which is you're hearing not just from close U.S. allies, but people inside the U.S. military whose job it is to build these relationships and protect the U.S. From terrorism, which is the putative goal of the president's travel ban. That's a key voice he's going to continue to hear.
All right, and I just want to jump in here with the breaking development here. Jeff Zeleny is reporting that an aide says Donald Trump has been informed of the temporary restraining order, and at this moment, we should expect the president to talk about this ruling tonight. He is going to be speaking live in about 15 minutes this hour at a rally in Nashville, so we are going to be bringing that to you to hear what exactly he has to say. Will he attack the judges? Will he not? This is a crucial moment moment and a test for him to see how he will respond. As our breaking coverage of this continues, we are, as we get more information, I'm going to bring it to you. I do want to mention the breaking news that Mark brought up just a moment ago. The president was asked today why he tweeted about President Obama wiretapping him before producing any evidence, and tonight he is responding. Here's what the president just said.
But wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
All right, he hadn't talked about this in 11 days since his tweets. And 11 days, when he first brought this up, he fired off 4 very specific tweets accusing President Obama of a crime. I want to read them to you. The first one was at 6:35 on a Saturday morning. It reads, "Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my, quote, wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism." The next one, about 15 minutes later. "Is it legal for a sitting president to be, quote, wiretapping a race for president prior to an election? Turned down by a court order. Caps a new low." A third tweet 3 minutes later after that. "I'd bet a good lawyer could make a great case out of the fact that President Obama was tapping my phones in October just prior to election." And the final missive 10 minutes after that. "How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon Watergate. Bad, parens, or sick, close parens, guy." Now, President Trump in those tweets clearly and repeatedly is talking about President Obama tapping his phones. Now, not everyone in the president's own party is standing by his side. Manu Raju is out front. And Manu, not only is wiretapping have a very specific definition, which of course is tapping a phone, but now you have senior Republicans who are seemingly abandoning the president on this claim.
Yeah, he's getting virtually no support on Capitol Hill from either side. And actually, James Comey just left a briefing a couple of hours ago with top senators on the Judiciary Committee. And one of those senators, Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat of California, came out and was asked directly, "Have you seen any evidence of wiretapping yet?" And she said no. And Aaron, she is not alone. Today, members of President Trump's own party are openly challenging his claim that Trump Tower had been wiretapped under the orders of President Barack Obama.
We don't have any evidence that that took place, and in fact, I don't believe, just in the last week of time, the people we've talked to, I don't think there was an actual tap of Trump Tower.
And Senator Lindsey Graham said official answers over Trump's allegation of wiretapping may soon be coming.
They may be no there, but there's pretty easy to answer the question, was there ever a warrant issued or applied for? So, Senator...
The answer is no.
Yeah, I believe it to be, but the longer they take to get back to me, the more concerned I am, and it builds suspicion. You know, what's taking them so long?
This comes as FBI Director James Comey privately briefed senators about its ongoing investigation. A move to diffuse tensions with the Republican Judiciary Chairman, who is holding up a key confirmation of a top Justice Department official until he gets more answers.
I expect people to respond according to what they told me. And in this particular instance, we were not given the respect that the constitutional gives us of oversight of the executive branch of government. And so that's very irritating.
The House Intelligence Committee is calling on the Justice Department to immediately provide any information to support President Trump's allegations that were made during a Saturday morning tweet storm 11 days ago.
President Obama wouldn't physically go over and wiretap Trump Tower, so now you have to decide, are you going to take the tweets literally? And if you are, then clearly the president was wrong. But if you're not going to take the tweets literally, and if there's a concern that the president has about other people, other surveillance activities, looking at him or his associates, either appropriately or inappropriately, we want to find that out.
But Nunes and the top Democrat on the committee, Adam Schiff, disagree on one key piece of their investigation: whether the Trump campaign had any improper contacts with Russians who were meddling in the elections. Do you have any evidence of that?
Not that I'm aware of.
You know, I wouldn't answer that question as categorically as my colleague.
Look, the answer is no.
And the Attorney General said today that he never gave the president any evidence or reason to believe he had been wiretapped by the Obama administration.
I have recused myself. I'm not talking to the president or the people who are investigating the case, and I'm unable to comment on any of these details.
Now, Aaron, today was the day in which Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island believed that he was going to get an answer from James Comey of a central question, whether or not the FBI is actually investigating the Trump campaign and any alleged contacts that occurred with Russian officials. Now, the deadline that he said that he agreed upon with James Comey came and went. He did not get an answer, but Comey telling both him and Senator Lindsey Graham today that they would send a letter next week to answer some of their questions, including evidence that they're seeking about whether Donald Trump was wiretapped by Barack Obama. But Aaron, the FBI saying that's going to be a classified letter, so we'll see if any of it eventually becomes public. Aaron.
All right, Manu, thank you very much. I want to go now to the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. And Congressman, I want to ask you about this breaking news on the wiretapping the president's comments. First, though, I want to ask you about the breaking news at this moment. The president, we understand, has just been informed that Hawaii has issued a nationwide temporary restraining order on his executive order, the new and revised one on foreign travelers from 6 countries and refugees. One of the main reasons was because of comments Trump repeatedly made on the campaign trail about banning Muslims. Do you have any concern that this could make the judges seem political, that they're looking at political statements and taking a political stand, or not?
No, I don't think it's a question of the judges being political or looking at political statements. I think what the judges are properly looking at is what was the intention of this executive order, and you can't ignore the legislative and non-legislative history here, particularly if you would learn in discovery more about what Rudy Giuliani said about the Trump administration coming to him and saying, okay, how do we put this Muslim ban in a form where we can put it off as something else? There's just no walking away from that history. And I think it is pertinent to the legal issues that the court has to decide. But I think also on the broader merits, the administration is going to have a very hard time demonstrating that the selection of these 6 countries was something other than arbitrary, and that it was somehow a good indicator of who might later commit an act of terrorism. Because, of course, if that was the criteria, you'd have to put Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or other countries really at the top of the list.
Yep. So I want to ask you about what the president just said. You heard him in that interview saying, quote, wiretap covers a lot of different things. Obviously, according to the dictionary, it doesn't. Wiretap is a very specific term. It means to tap a telephone or telegraph wire. It's an old definition. In order to get information, he's referring to it, he says, more generally. Do you think that's fair or not?
No, I think it's really would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. No, wiretap is a wiretap, and particularly when he elaborates that he believed that President Obama was tapping his phones. So I certainly don't think that wiretap is broad enough to cover what is really a baseless accusation, a complete fabrication by the President of the United States. It's certainly not broad enough to cover that, and that is exactly, unfortunately, what is involved here.
So I want to play again a little bit more of what the president said today about the wiretap investigations, because he said more information is coming. You're obviously the one in the investigation. You're seeing it. Here's what he said.
I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
You, again, are the one receiving this information on the House Intelligence Committee. Have you seen anything very interesting? Do you have any idea what these things could be and why they would be coming over the next couple weeks?
Sure. First of all, we have seen nothing, no evidence to support the president's claim, nor does anyone really expect to. I think what the president is saying is in 2 weeks, look forward to me giving you another obfuscation, another distortion, another, feint. Maybe I'll tell you that in another couple weeks I'll come up with yet another explanation. Of course, over the last couple weeks, we have seen endless permutations by Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway and others as they try to rationalize, make sense of, explain away what you really can't, that he accused his predecessor of being bad and sick and wiretapping him. And I do want to underscore why this is important, because some would write it off as just the president being the president. But first of all, like his comments to Bill O'Reilly when he said, we're no different than Russia, Putin's a killer, but how are we any better? These comments that his predecessor wiretapped him also undermine our democracy. They play into the Russian narrative of things that, yes, Russia, we don't make any bones about it, we're a corrupt kleptocracy. we don't really pretend otherwise. So are the Americans. They're just hypocritical about it. And when you have a president of the United States saying basically Putin is right, I've been bugged by my predecessor, we're equally corrupt, that just feeds that whole destructive narrative.
Congressman, one thing, though, that I'm trying to understand, and this is a tough one, right? But we understand there's questions out there, and I ask you, is it possible that there was some sort of surveillance, right, obviously, of Russians who were having conversations with people in Trump Tower, or of Russians who may have been in Trump Tower, right, that there was surveillance that ended up picking up the Trump campaign and things that they said? Is that possible?
Well, you know, it's certainly possible, for example, that when we look at foreign spies talking to each other, that we might collect what's called incidental collection, where either a foreign spy talks to an American or a foreign spy talks to another foreign spy about an American. That's called incidental collection. But of course, that is not only lawful, but it's also not what the president was talking about. He was explicitly talking about Barack Obama bugging him in Trump Tower. And I don't think he can walk away from that baseless accusation by trying to say, well, you know, somewhere at some point in some country at some time, there may be something that I can hang my hat on.
Of course, he shouldn't be able to walk away from that, because there is a very specific definition, and he must be held to account for that. But if there was surveillance, and it picked up people in the campaign, and it came from some sort of order, fights, again, we just don't know. You are the one who has the information. If that happened, are you concerned that many Americans may see that as surveillance? They may see that as something that was done against the Trump campaign, and they may see folks like yourself, by adhering to such a technical definition, as being on a witch hunt.
You know, first of all, it's not a technical definition. We're not expecting President Trump to flip through the code book and see how Title 18 defines a wiretap. He used it in, you know, very colloquial terms. Barack Obama tapped my phones. So by his own language, by his own lay terms, or by expert terms, it all adds up to the same thing. Now, we are prohibited from talking about any form of classified information as it pertains to foreign intelligence gathering or a criminal wiretap. We can't discuss that. But, you know, we can discuss this accusation because it is completely without merit. And I think, you know, it's incumbent on us to explain to the public what is lawful surveillance and what isn't, and that what Sean Spicer is saying, what the president's saying, is simply not either logically coherent or possible, because what it means is to say, on the one hand, as they have, the president wasn't subject to an investigation and a court-approved warrant, and on the other hand, we still believe that they were tapping his phones, means that the FBI would have had to have been engaged in some rogue operation, unsupervised and unapproved by a court, and there's simply no evidence of that.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Congressman. Thank you, as always.
Thank you.
And next, live pictures from Nashville. The president will be there. He's going to be speaking at a rally moments from now, and he is expected, Jeff Zeleny reports at this moment, to respond to his travel ban being blocked again. The words and what he says are crucial. Again, that coming up any moment. Plus, Paul Ryan refusing to tell CNN if the health care bill will pass. Calls it a goofy question, is it? And Ginny Mose on whether we should take President Trump literally or seriously.
They take him literally and not seriously.
No. Don't take him literally, take him symbolically.
One, in the field, and around the globe.
What makes you believe you can accomplish?